Hello besties, welcome back to Caitlin Off Book. That's right, we've done a little rebrand. This is the channel formerly known as Reading with Marie. I decided to change it to Caitlin Off Book, one, because Marie is my middle name, which is fine. It's just a little confusing for people. So Caitlin Off Book is easier for people to find, and it also, I felt like, describes the direction that this channel is going, because I really want to start making lifestyle and theater content as well as booktube content. The booktube content is not going away, but it's going to be mixed in with some other things, and so I felt like we needed a little name change, a little rebrand, so we've done that. I haven't deleted any of the Reading with Marie videos, like the original ones, I don't think. There are some that got taken down because I fully just pirated clips of Harry Potter. So that's my bad. We got a copyright strike on that one. Those are not up anymore, but there's still some stuff left. If you want to watch my cringy sophomore year of high school self talk about, flawed characters or whatever. But if not, and I suggest that you don't, you can instead continue watching this video in which we are going to rate the books that I read at the beach. So just to explain my ranking system or rating system, I always get the words rank and rate confused. I promise that I had a 4.6 GPA in high school and I took AP English for 2 years. I promise you that I know how the English language works, but sometimes rate and rank are confusing to me. Moving on, we are rating with a T the books that I read at the beach this year. So I go to the beach every Memorial Day, and I usually read 8 books in 3 days because I just don't talk to people and I sit under my little umbrella so that I don't get sunburned, and I'm a huge nerd and I read the whole time. I read 5 books, six books. My rating system, just to go through it, 1 is I hated this and I didn't finish it. I did not like it, simply was not a fan. 2 is I didn't like it, but I did finish it. 3 is I liked it, I finished it, it was pretty good, but it's not, I'm not gonna read it again, And then 4 is I liked it, I would read it again, but there's nothing it's missing that kind of special element of this is the greatest thing of all time, And then 5 is oh my God, cried at the end, this was incredible, recommending this to everybody I know. That's top tier. I tend to rate things really highly because I feel bad about being mean to people, so there might be things on this list that are 5s and don't deserve to be, but I maintain the right to be nice to people. And that's probably what we're gonna do. Okay, so the first book that I read is The Davenports by Crystal Marquis. It's a library book, that's why it's the shiny, because I'm trying to stop buying books because I read them one time and then they just sit on my shelf and I have too many. Right now, I'm getting rid of some books, so I'll show you. I have this whole box and it's full of them. There's a lot in there. But anyway, The Davenports by Crystal Marquis. The Davenports follows 4 Black women through the upper echelons of Chicago high society in 1910. It's a combination of kind of their romantic lives and also just their hopes and dreams in general. Most of the characters also run in these political activist circles, which adds sort of a new twist to the period drama YA genre. So the first character we meet is Olivia, and Olivia is the oldest Davenport daughter? She's the oldest daughter, very much follows the oldest daughter stereotype of super put together, very much sort of takes care of all the people around her. She's just really good at the whole high society thing. Her passion, I guess, is horseback riding. She gives that up though to kind of take her mom's place in high society. She hosts all of these events at their house, and her character at the beginning is set up to marry this wealthy, quote unquote, we think potentially wealthy businessman from London. The next character we meet is Ruby, and Ruby is Olivia's best friend. She is not quite as wealthy as Olivia and the Davenports. Her dad is running for mayor of Chicago, and so he's been spending a lot of their personal finances on his campaign, and so they're running out of money. Her parents' goal for Ruby is to actually marry Olivia's brother John, who's kind of like the heir to the Davenport fortune. He and Ruby were like kind of had a thing, and then he went off to school, and now he's come back. The whole time she's like trying to get John's attention, and that's her main goal throughout the book. The next character we meet is Helen. So Helen is Olivia's younger sister, and she is kind of the opposite of Olivia. She is not really a society girly. She loves fixing cars. That's like her big secret, is that she hides in the garage, and John lets her, help him restore, I think it's a Model T, but her dad doesn't take her seriously, so she has to hide the fact that she actually works in the garage with John and the other mechanics. Helen is not set up by society to have a love interest, but she ends up falling in love with her sister's presumed fiance, which is the rich guy from London. So the last character we follow is Amy Rose, and Amy Rose is a servant of the Davenports. Her mother has passed away, but her mother used to also be a servant in their household, and Amy Rose grew up being like really close friends with Olivia and Helen, and the mom passed away. It's also a really big part of Amy Rose's character that she's of mixed race, and so she kind of doesn't fit in anywhere, and so what she really wants is to leave the servant world behind and start her own hair salon, specifically for Black women. Her mom kind of instills in her this idea of like never depending on a man, so she wants to open the salon all by herself and be like completely independent from anybody else. So what's interesting about this book, and what was frustrating to me at first, and then I ended up really liking at the end, is that none of the characters end up with the romantic partner that they're supposed to end up with. So Olivia, who's supposed to be marrying this like wealthy businessman from London, ends up falling in love with this politician from Alabama. I guess he's a lawyer. He describes himself as a lawyer from the South, and he's on this political activist circuit. He's trying to sort of put an end to Jim Crow, and so she starts getting interested in his work and going to protest with him, and then he asks her to run away with him, and so you think like, oh, she's gonna buck tradition and she's not gonna marry this rich guy from London, she's gonna go and be an activist, but then at the end, she realizes how much she can do where she already is, and so she doesn't end up with anyone. I love that kind of plot twist, where like you think the plot twist is one thing and then it's the other thing, right? On Helen's part, she also doesn't end up with a rich guy because, plot twist again, he's actually not rich. He's actually lying about his finances. Hello? Anyway, Helen is kind of set up to be like, oh, I don't want to get married. Love that for her. But then she kind of starts to fall in love with Olivia's fiance, which is like, oh my God, big deal. But then she finds out that he's actually been lying to her and Olivia and their parents the entire time, and he has no money, and he's been hoping to get money by marrying Olivia. So then Helen is like, yeah, not really a big fan of that. Like, you can leave. But then she's like, maybe I'm going to forgive him. And I'm pretty sure that's where the book ends, of her being like, maybe I will forgive him, maybe I won't. But she still really wants to help with the car business. So that's kind of her whole arc. And then who's next? Ruby. So Ruby is set up to fall in love with John, Olivia's brother. But Ruby, she's like kind of afraid that he's losing interest in her. So she decides that what she's going to do is start letting this other man start courting her. Can't remember his name for the life of me. I don't remember any of the men's names in any of these books. Which I think that's how it should be, you know? The men don't really matter in these books. He's wealthy, but I can't remember what he does, but he's not as wealthy as Ruby's parents want him to be, and so they're super against them getting married. And then at the end, Ruby is like, I love him. But this is after multiple times he's been like, do you really love me, or are you only dating me for attention? And she's like, no, I really love you. And then she's like, okay, I actually was dating you for attention, but now I really love you. And he's like, that's not really good enough. And then they end up together at the end. And it's great. And I love that happy ending. Oh, and then Amy Rose. So Amy Rose also set up to fall in love with John. They are in love. They are in love. I'm not going to say that they aren't in love, but I will say that I don't like John because John is completely unable to get over the fact that she's like a servant of their family. Because every time that people mention her, like maybe having a thing with him or being in love, he's like, no, she's just a servant, like, and then his dad is like, if you marry her, you forfeit your inheritance, and he's like, and he doesn't say anything, and Amy Rose is like, okay, well, I guess I don't love you then, like, I guess you kind of suck. And like, the first time that he did this, he apologized by literally buying her a salon, just like buying her a storefront. Like, she saved up her money for years and she's like, I'm gonna buy this storefront, I'm independent, like I've got this myself. And then somebody buys it right before she, like, so like she's been promised this salon, and then somebody comes in like the day before she's supposed to take ownership and is like, I'm a man. And they're like, oh, you're a better investment, and they just give it to him, and she doesn't get it. And so she's really disappointed. And so John's like, you know what, I hurt your feelings because I made fun of you. I made fun of you in front of my friends, so I'm just gonna buy you a salon. And she's like, thanks, but like I really wanted to do this by myself, so maybe not thanks. And so at the end, she's kind of conflicted about, you know, should I really be in love with John, or should I, like, so that's kind of the summary of where all the characters go. My biggest problem with this book is that I really, really thought that it could have been 4 books. Like, honestly, I would have read 4 books about each of these characters and had them, like, be an interconnected series. That would have been really, really cool to me. I felt like with all 4 characters, the pacing was kind of off. Like, you kept switching back between perspectives, and it really focused more on Olivia and Ruby, and then Amy Rose, and then Helen was focused on the least. And so I felt like you could either take Helen away completely or just make it like 4 separate books. Would have been a really cool idea. So for that reason, I did give it a 3 out of 5 because I did think it was really good. I don't know that I would read it again, but I like it. Like, I really liked it. Maybe it's a 4. I think I only gave it a 3 because I was like, oh, I can't give everything a 4 or a 5. But it's a 4. Now that I'm talking about it, this book, The Davenports, is a 4. Okay, so the next book I read was Spells for Lost Things by Jenna Evans Welch. I actually have read this before. It follows this girl named Willow and this boy named Mason. And Willow is... her parents are divorced, and so she is living out in California with her mom, and her dad is back at their old apartment in Brooklyn, and he has this new family. And so Willow feels really conflicted because she misses her parents, she misses kind of her life in Brooklyn, and since they've left, she's never really felt at home, and so she really wants to travel. She calls it like an extreme version of wanderlust, basically. And her mom she's the owner of this like event planning company. She's very girl boss. She and Willow are not close, like, at all. They do not talk. But then one day she's like, hey, so we actually have to go to Salem, Massachusetts. And Willow's like, why the frick are we going to Salem, Massachusetts? And she's like, well, my sister died and she left me this house. And Willow's like, didn't know you had a sister. And Mom's like, oh yeah, my twin sister, Sage. And Willow's like, yeah, fully did not know you had a twin sister. And the mom's like, no, I'm not going to explain that. And Willow's like, okay. And so they go to Massachusetts, they go to Salem, and they go and they see this house that Sage has left her mom. And it keeps getting weirder because Sage meets like her aunts, and she thinks that they're just like kidding about this whole Salem witch thing, and then it turns out that they're actually like doing magic, and they can all read palms and read tarot cards, and they like make her these spells. So she's like, Mom, you never told me about any of this. And the mom is like, shut up, we're gonna settle this in 2 days. I'm selling the house, we're going back to LA, and I'm like never gonna speak to you again about this. The other perspective that we follow, because again, split perspective book, is Mason. Now, Mason has been in and out of foster care for most of his life. His mom, whose name I can't remember, that's my bad, his mom has been separated from him, and he's just been put in a new foster home with this woman who was really good friends with his mom in high school. And so he's there, and he's kind of like weirded out by the fact that this woman knew his mom before, but then she never like, he doesn't think that she ever contacted his mom after she started to fall into addiction, and so he thinks that she was a bad friend. And the woman's husband, I forget his name because he's a man, the woman's husband is like a real estate agent, and so it turns out that he's trying to sell the house that Willow's mom just inherited. So Willow sneaks into the house one night, Mason sneaks into the house one night. They end up seeing each other on the roof because there's an observatory on the roof that Mason saw earlier when he was looking at the house with his foster father. And so he like climbs up there at night, and he's making all these like observations. And then Willow kind of climbs up, and she's like, hello? And she thinks he's a ghost. And he's like, oh my God, I just got caught. And so he basically jumps off the roof, but he leaves his book. So then Willow's like, I guess he's a real person then? And so she takes it, and she's like, I don't really know what to do with it. And then the foster father has a meeting with Willow's mom. And so he's like, I'm going to bring Mason. Why don't you bring your daughter Willow? And they meet, and they realize like that they just saw each other the night before on the roof of this house. And Willow this whole time is on her little like side quest to discover the secret of the curse that's been put on all the women of her family. So there's this curse that you're like cursed to never have what you really want. And what Willow really wants is a home. And that's why she wants to travel. And so the curse can only be broken if 2 of the women of the family like make this commitment to each other and find their way back to each other, basically. And so the aunts, Willow's aunts, Daisy and Violet, and the other one, I think her name is Poppy, they decide that Mason is like her sidekick, and they're gonna solve this mystery. So they're looking at all these letters, and they finally discover it, and then just as they discover it, Mason figures out where his mom is, and so he like runs away to go find her. And so then it's this whole drama of like, where's Mason? Spoiler alert, we find Mason. Mason finds his mom. She's not capable of taking care of him. It's really sad, but he does come back, and he gets back together with Willow, and it's presumed that they're gonna stay together. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 because I loved it. The second time reading it was not quite as emotional, but I remember the first time reading it that I cried like a lot. And it's just like, it's a really kind of sweet, moving, sort of like young adult romance. It's not super deep. Like, there's angst, but it's not too angsty. Mason's this kind of like shy, awkward little dude, which I love. So yeah, I gave this one a 5 out of 5 because I am a big fan. So the next book I read was Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds. I got this in a book box from the Strand. It's kind of like Book of the Month, but not. I really liked it the first time I read it. And so it's another one of those books that's like on my read again before you give it away shelf. So before I made this video, I was certain that I was giving these away, and now that I'm talking about them, I'm like, maybe I need to keep them. YouTube is a bad influence. So Opposite of Always follows this high school senior. His name is Jack, and Jack is, at the beginning of the book, in love with his best friend Jillian. The problem is that his friend Jillian is dating his other best friend, whose name I can't remember because he's a man. So he's at this party with Jillian. They've gone to tour their like local college that they're both gonna go to the next year, and he's on the stairs and he's staring at Jillian across the room, and she's like talking to other people, and he's like, oh my god, she's so beautiful. And then all of a sudden this girl is like, bro, you're like in the way. And he's like, what? And she's like, you're totally damming up the stairs. And he's like, oh my bad. And then they start to have this like quirky little jokey conversation, and it develops into this 4-month-long romance. They're kind of like on and off the whole time. And then he finds out at the end that Kate's really sick, but he doesn't really know what she's sick with. And then she dies within literally the first like 10 pages, which you're kind of like, what do we do with this? And then it's like, flashback 4 months before. Anyway, Kate dies. And so he had just seen her in the hospital, and her mom had like called him when he got home, and he was like, she's gone. And he's like, oh my god, I have to get to the hospital. And so he's running down the stairs, and he slips because it's been raining, I think, and he hits his head. And you're like, oh my god, did Jack just die in the first 20 pages of this book? No, Jack is reborn in a time loop. That's right, fellas. It's a time loop book, which I actually really enjoyed. Time loops, first of all, scare me. I'm afraid that I will get stuck in a time loop, which is ridiculous because I don't think that they're real. Unless somebody else is in one right now, and I've actually been living this day like multiple times forever. I have to look at my notes. We're in this time loop. He finds out that Kate, who is the girl, I don't know if I mentioned her name before, Kate actually has sickle cell. And so he spends like each recurring time loop trying to find a cure. And so he like finds this doctor, and he's like sells his car and makes all these bets to try and make all this money so that he can pay for the doctor to get her in on this clinical trial. And what I like about it is that it's not just about him getting the girl and like saving her life. It's not just about romantic love. It's also about familial love and platonic love, and he has to find a way to save her while also keeping his relationships with his family and his friends, which I think is a really kind of great addition to a YA novel, because a lot of times in these like YA romance novels, you have these people that give up everything for their significant other, and there's like no focus on what happens to the rest of their life. Like they just go off and do another thing and they abandon their life. And this book really focuses on how every single one of his actions impacts every single other person around him, which I really liked, as opposed to just this one goal of like making this relationship work. He also has to make all of his other relationships work. Looking at my notebook, I gave this a 5 out of 5. I think it's because I also cried the first time I read this. I didn't cry the second time, mostly because I was in public. And I used to cry a lot in public, and so now I try not to because I don't think that that's my brand anymore. Anyway, I gave this a 5 out of 5 the first time I read it. I would say that the score went down the second time I read it, only because I wasn't really surprised by anything, but I would definitely read it again. Right? So it's like a 4.5 out of 5. We'll go with that. So the next book I read was Queen Bee by Amelie Howard. I love the name Amelie. I'm a big fan of it. Again, this is another library book. I'm pretty sure it's due tomorrow, which is why I'm making this video today. The interesting thing about Queen Bee is that, voice crack, hello. The interesting thing about Queen Bee is that it's very Bridgerton-esque. Like, it's the same time period, it's the same geographic location. If you told me it was part of the Bridgerton universe, I would be like, oh, like, yeah, that makes sense, right? The difference between the two is the way in which they handle race. So in Bridgerton, I don't know if anybody remembers, but at the beginning of the series, people were like, they were looking at the casting and they were like, oh, so is it meant to be colorblind and like the character's race doesn't matter, or is race going to play a larger part in it? And I think now that the Queen Charlotte series has come out, people like really fully understand that like the role that racism plays in the series. In Queen Bee, society is sort of understood to be completely colorblind. So there's really not any kind of bias that I can remember within the upper class society in the way that there is in Bridgerton. It was also mentioned in the author's note that she like had looked at historical examples of people of color in upper class British society, and that there were actually more examples than we think there are, but that she kind of exaggerated that and made it more of like a commonplace phenomenon to find people of color in Britain's like aristocracy. So the book follows Ella, who is the daughter of a nobleman who's kind of financially not doing well, right? We're struggling a little bit. So Ella lives with her dad. Her mom has passed away, and she's kind of this like awkward, weird looking kid. Like, she's just not pretty. And she has this best friend, and her best friend's name is Poppy. And Poppy is not part of the aristocracy, but she is really rich. So a lot of times she'll give Ella like her kind of cast off clothes that she doesn't want anymore. They'll go into town to get ice cream, and Poppy will pay for it. And so it's this kind of like weird dynamic of technically Ella is higher in society than Poppy is, but Poppy has more money, so they end up kind of evening out. And so Poppy is her only friend until the Duke and Duchess of Harbridge have moved to their tiny little village. And Poppy can't like just go and meet them because she's not titled, like she's not part of the aristocracy, but Ella can because her dad is a nobleman. So she's like, I'm gonna go over and meet the Harbridges. And Poppy's like, please, can you introduce me to them? Like, I totally want to meet them. And Ella's like, yeah, I for sure will. And then she doesn't. Because she meets them, and they have 2 kids. They have Keston. I always want to call him Kenston because I knew a Kenston in high school. They have Keston and Zia, who's their daughter. So it's Keston and Zia. Keston is like her age, and Zia's a few years younger. And so she ends up becoming best friends with both of them. And she like kind of has a crush on Keston, but she doesn't really act on it, nor does she like acknowledge it. Like, you can tell she has a crush on him, but she doesn't want to say it. And Keston is also definitely in love with her and doesn't want to say it. So she and Keston and Zia become really good friends, but she doesn't tell Poppy about it because she's like, I really don't want to tell Poppy about Keston because Keston will fall in love with Poppy and probably abandon me because Poppy is also like really conventionally pretty. So she doesn't tell Poppy about Keston, and then one day she and Poppy are going into town in their little carriage, and Ella has kind of gained this confidence now where like Poppy used to get out of the carriage before Ella, and typically like the person of the highest rank is supposed to get out first. And Ella always let Poppy do it because it made Poppy feel better. But then on this particular day, Ella is like, no, I'm getting out first because I have a title and you don't. So Ella gets out first, which makes Poppy mad, and then they see Keston and Zia. And Poppy's like, oh my god, it's Keston and Zia, oh my god, like it's like, oh my god, it's like the Duke's kid. And Ella is like weirdly not freaking out. And then she and Keston and Zia talk to each other on this really familiar level, and Poppy's like, oh my god, you're best friends with him and you didn't tell me. And Ella's like, no, like I don't know them super well. And Poppy's like, you know what, I'm gonna be super mean and spiteful now. And it completely ruins their friendship. And so from then on, like, she and Keston and Zia are besties, and Poppy is like not her girl. Like, they're not friends. And so she and Zia are at kind of their like May Day kind of spring festival, and they're not supposed to be. And so they're there, and then they're kind of sneaking around because they're not supposed to be there, and Poppy sees them, and she's like, you're not supposed to be here. And Zia's like, who cares? And Ella's like, oh, Poppy's super vengeful and is definitely going to ruin our lives. And Zia's like, no, she's not. It's going to be fine. So then Keston comes, and he's like, Zia, like, we got to go home. And Zia's like, no, can we do, like, one dance? And they're like, no. And she's like, please. And Keston is like, let's ask Ella. And Ella's like, I think we should stay for one dance. So they stay for one dance, and they're doing their little dancey dance, and then the Duke of Harbridge shows up, and he's like, Keston and Zia, you're not supposed to be here. Let's leave. And they're like, oh no, that's really bad. So then Keston is sent away to school. And so Ella can't see Keston anymore. He's like her best friend. He's been coming home on weekends, but like he has to sneak away to talk to her. And so they have this little spot in the woods that they sneak away to. So he comes home from school, and he like sneaks to the woods, and Ella's there, and they meet, and something happens. Oh, right. Poppy asks for Ella's dress back. And then she meets Keston in the woods. Poppy finds her and she's like, ooh, you were here with a boy, that's not allowed, like that'll ruin your reputation. And Ella was like, it was just Keston, and Keston and I are besties, like we're not like that. And Poppy's like, I don't really care. So then she spreads a rumor that Ella actually had sex with the son of their vicar, which is super not allowed. And the vicar's son totally goes along with it because he's also like low-key in love with Poppy. And like for proof, she shows them the dress that she took back from Ella, and she's like, I found this at a cottage in the woods, and you left it there after you had sex with the son of the vicar. And everybody knows that it's Ella's dress because they all saw Ella wearing it at the spring festival, but really Poppy took it back from Ella. So then Ella's reputation is ruined, and they send Ella away to this reform school that's like in Scotland, and that's supposed to be scary because it's Scotland. And so she goes and she's like, I hate everything, and actually my life's purpose is now revenge. And she's like, I'm not gonna go to church, I'm gonna yell at the sky. So she yells at the sky, and then this woman is like, why are you doing that? Stop doing that. And Ella's like, I'm angry. And she's like, don't be angry anymore. Forgiveness is super important. And Ella's like, I don't think so. But they end up becoming mentor and mentee. And so it's the woman that finds her, they call her Church. That's not her real name. Her real name is Felicity, and she's actually super duper rich and also a titled member of the aristocracy. She also has this underlying health condition that she takes opium for. I can't remember what the health condition is. They don't name it, but I think it's like an iron deficiency. Ella realizes that Church is actually addicted to opium, and that's her real problem, and that's really what's making her sick, not the iron deficiency. So she decides to steal all of Church's drugs and like throw them away. And then she like puts her on this special diet. She nurses her back to health. She gets her kind of clean from the opium. And so in return, Church, who this whole time has been like, Ella, you really don't need revenge on these people. Like, it's really not that big of a deal, right? But this whole time, Ella's been like, I want revenge. And Church is like, you don't really need revenge. But then Ella nurses her back to health. And so Church is like, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Italy, and I'm just going to like make you my heir. And so now you have access to all of my money, and you can go to London and do whatever you want and ruin whoever's life you want to. And like, it's fine. And Ella's like, for real? And Church is like, mm-hmm. And Ella's like, well, okay. And she moves to London. She dyes her hair black because apparently that's going to change her appearance. And she decides she's going to infiltrate society. And she is going to become Lyra, or Lyra. It's Lyra. I say Lyra because they make a pun about liars, so I think it's pronounced that way. She becomes Lyra, and she decides that dyeing her hair black and going through puberty is going to make her unrecognizable. So she's going to enter as this like rich heiress and ruin Poppy's life and make Keston fall in love with her and then break his heart. Spoiler alert, she succeeds in doing that, but then she feels really bad about it. So she apologizes, and everybody's like, boo, we know who you really are, you need to leave. And then she's like, no, really, I didn't do any of that, but I did lie to you all. And they're like, yeah, you're not welcome here anymore. And then Church shows up, and she's like, no, that actually is my heir now. Because the big thing is they were like, you stole money from Felicity. And she was like, no, she gave it to me. And they were like, we don't think that's true. And then Felicity pops up, and she's like, no, I for sure did give her that money. And they're like, okay. And they let her back into society. She falls in love with Keston. It's great. I gave this book a 4. Because, 4? I'm going to say 3.5, actually. I'm changing all of my rankings as we do this. Or ratings. I know the English language. So, I'm going to give this a 3.5 because it was good. I liked it. I don't know that I would read it again, and I also didn't cry, which apparently is, like, criteria for me now. I don't know. So it's a 3.5 out of 5. It was pretty good. I really liked it, but I did think Ella was annoying sometimes. So there's that. Okay, so the next book I read was Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I was gonna donate it. I'm not donating it anymore. I'm keeping this. This is mine forever. So it follows this girl. Her name is Rowan Roth. She wants to become a romance novelist, but she can't tell anyone because her parents are children's book authors, and they think that romance is like a stupid genre that's only for stupid people, and they don't really respect it. So Rowan's like, I really can't tell my parents that I really want to write romance books. And she's actually like, she's just finished writing her novel. Her other personality trait is that she is like the smartest girl in school, and her academic rival's name is Neil McNair. And Neil is the smartest guy in school, and they have competed against each other for everything since freshman year, when they did this like book report contest thing, and he won with a Mark Twain book. I think he won with Huckleberry Finn, and she was like, that's a stupid book, but she wrote about a romance novel and he called it silly. And so from then on, they have like hated each other, and they've been academic rivals this whole time. And then we get to the last day of school, and on the last day of school, the seniors have like a half day, and then they do this thing called Howl. And Howl is this kind of scavenger hunt through Seattle, and whoever wins gets like $5,000. So they have to find and take pictures of all of these different locations in Seattle, but they also it's also similar to Capture the Flag, kind of. Everybody's wearing an armband, right? They have like a blue armband, and everybody gets a name of somebody that they have to kill. And so they have to go and like rip that person's armband off, and then that person is dead, and they don't get to keep playing, and you take the other person's target. So like Rowan's first target is her ex-boyfriend, so she goes, she takes his armband off, he gives her her next target, whose name I don't remember because it's probably a man. Easy enough, right? So Rowan and Neil are playing, and Rowan is like, I have to win Howl, because she and Neil had been competing for valedictorian, and he won. And so she was like, okay, he won valedictorian, so I have to win Howl. So they're playing, and then Rowan finds out that people are targeting her because they actually really hate that she and Neil have won everything. It's this girl who was always like third best behind them, and she could never beat either of them. And so she gathers a team of people, and she's like, we're going to beat Rowan Roth and Neil McNair. Like, we're going to beat both of them, and I, Caroline, am going to win. And Rowan overhears this, and she also overhears Caroline say something really anti-Semitic. And Rowan is Jewish, as is Neil, which we don't know until later. And then Rowan's like, I totally wish I knew that, because then we would have something to bond over. And Neil's like, yeah, I just don't tell people that because people are really anti-Semitic. And Rowan's like, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. So Rowan and Neil find out about this plot, and they're like, we're going to team up. And so they team up to win, and they're in the lead the whole time. Like, they are going to win. So they're teamed up, and they're like, first they're like just allies, and then they're like, maybe we're friends. And then Neil signs her yearbook, and he's like, don't look at it until after I leave. And she's like, for sure, I won't. And then they get in this big fight, and then she reads it, and he's like, I'm actually in love with you. And Rowan's like, oh, so I'm actually in love with you too. But they've just had this fight, so she's like, crap, like, he hates me now. And all of these things happen. It's really not important. You really just need to read the book. You really just need to read the book. But they get together at the end. It's lovely. I love it. 5 out of 5. I cried. Would goodness. 5 out of 5. Would read again. I'm gonna go wipe the snot off my face, and I'll be right back. So the last book I read was Lost Roses by Martha Hall Kelly, and it's very different from the other books in this stack because it's not YA fiction. It's like actual real grown-up adult fiction, and it's also historical fiction. It's the second in the series, but it's a prequel to the book The Lilac Girls, which is about World War II. So this is set in World War I, and it follows 3 different women. The first character we follow is Sonia, and Sonia is a Russian aristocrat. She is sort of newlywed. She has this son, Max. They live with her dad and her stepmother and her husband and her sister Luba in this sort of, well, they live in St. Petersburg first, and then the peasants start attacking, and the dad is part of the like financial ministry part of the Russian government, and so they have to flee with all these Russian ministry codes to the countryside. So they go to the countryside, and Sonia meets this girl, Varinka. Varinka is a peasant girl that's like Varinka's mother is like, you have to leave the house, because Varinka is actually in this like really gross, abusive relationship with Taurus, who we find out is actually her half-brother. We don't find out until the end, but they have this weird, like, thing where they can't have sex, but they make out, and it's really, like, uncomfortable to read. But Varinka really wants a child, and she knows she can't have one with Taurus because he's her brother. So she goes to be a nurse for Sonia's son, Max. And then there's the Russian Revolution, and the peasants rise up, and they overtake Sonia's country house. And so while the family is fleeing, Varinka is like, I've got Max. I'm going to save Max because I really want a baby. So I'm just going to take this one. Like, this one's mine now. So she takes Max, and she is living in the house with Taurus. And then Taurus is like, we're going to go to St. Petersburg, and then we're going to go to Paris. And Sonia has also escaped and gone to Paris. And this whole time, while everybody's like trying to escape and not die and save the baby, Sonia has a friend, Eliza, and Eliza is this rich woman in New York. And she and Sonia, I don't really know how they ended up friends. I think like Sonia's husband is friends with Eliza's husband. And so Eliza is trying to save Sonia because she's her best friend. But then Eliza's husband dies, and she has this really complicated relationship with her daughter. Anyway, the whole thing culminates in all of the women basically getting what they want. And Sonia gets her baby back. It's kind of hard to explain without reading because it's just really complex. I think it is difficult to explain. I did give it, what did I give this? Yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because like it was good. I know that sounds like a 3. It's really a 4 because it is really good when you read it, but it's hard to explain. And obviously I did read it again, but I didn't like fall in love with it. You know? Like, I'm perfectly happy having read it twice and being done with it. So that is all of the books that I read at the beach. There will be more BookTube content coming at some point. There's also going to be theater content. I'm thinking I'm going to do like a stage manage with me video because I'm currently stage managing something, and so I'll probably do like a little tour of my binder and then bring you along to a show. We're already out of rehearsals. We're like into the run, so I can't bring you to a rehearsal, but I'll also explain the rehearsal process. And then I'm doing a returning to ballet video. I know that's like a trend right now. People are like starting ballet as adults. I quit when I was a senior in high school to focus on college auditions for musical theater. Spoiler alert, I got into one musical theater program out of 20, and I didn't go. I'm in straight acting at NYU. It's not that big of a deal. I love NYU, and it's the perfect place for me. I ended up in the right place, but I miss dance. And I'm doing a dance minor, but I'm like fully not prepared to start classes in the fall, so I'm spending this summer like getting ready to go back to ballet specifically, but just dance in general. So there will be a video about that. And then I have some ideas. This is my YouTube notebook. This is what I've been reading out of this whole time. So there's some stuff in there. But if you have other suggestions, you can put it in the comments. Maybe I'll read it. I'll probably read it. And I'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Yay!